You're supposed to pronounce his name as Thoreau, and since I hadn't used the correct pronunciation, Thoreau, so I hadn't done a thorough reading of Walden, so now I have to reread it and pronounce his name as Thoreau, so in a thorough manner, but they're still customarily called Thoreau by Americans, so that's probably a French word in a way.
No, it's a Greek word.
Greek word. You think that every word is Greek. Everything good came from the Greeks. So anything that's any good is from the Greeks, and if it's no good, it's probably Turkish. I'm only joking. I actually like Turks. I went to Turkey like 3 times. I've even been to Konya. I'm only kidding. I'm not restarting the war. Do you remember if the Greeks hadn't won at Thermopylae or something, we'd all be speaking Turkish.
That was with the Persians, Thermopylae.
Yeah. Yeah, but if they hadn't won, if it wasn't for 300 men, we'd all be speaking Turkish. Persian. Yeah. Same thing, though. It's a joke.
Nothing lasts forever. Probably the Persians would be speaking Greek.
The Persians would adopt Greek, because anyone who invades Greek is invaded by Greek culture. That's why the Romans invaded Greece, but Rome was invaded by Greek culture. Is that like how Strasbourg, France, is invaded by Germans? Every Christmas season is invaded by an army of Germans over the border to France. Why don't we just read more thoroughly instead of being unthorough and try to get through reading thoroughly? Thorough. We're reading higher laws, so we're going to learn how to think higher, to get our thoughts out of the gutter and think about higher things instead of the battle of the Thermopylae. As I came home through the woods we're reading Walden. As I came home through the woods with my string of fish trailing my pole, it being now quite dark, I caught a glimpse of a woodchuck stealing across my path. This is like being in Ohio, dear, on the farm. I caught a glimpse of a woodchuck stealing across my path. In Ohio, they have high-powered rifles in their pickups, and they pull over and pull out the high-powered rifle with the big long scope with the 30-06, and they try to get a quick shot. A glimpse of a woodchuck stealing across my path, and felt a strange thrill of savage delight. That's what the farmers in Ohio, they get a thrill of savage delight when they pull out their gun. And was strongly tempted to seize and devour him raw. Not that I was hungry then, except for that wildness which he represented. What?
What did he eat?
He devoured a woodchuck.
What is that?
What's a woodchuck? It's a little ground animal.
Who devoured it, Thoreau?
Well, this is what he was saying. He did once eat a woodchuck.
Oh, I thought the way he says he devoured it.
He's thinking of devouring. He's talking about philosophy now. To devour or not to devour a woodchuck is the question. So we're asking, if you remember Susan Cheever, the woman who wrote American Bloomsbury, says that Thoreau presents one of the strongest arguments ever given for being a vegetarian. We're talking about the higher laws of vegetarianism and whether to shoot the woodchuck. As I came home through the woods with my string of fish trailing my pole, it being now quite dark, I caught a glimpse of a woodchuck stealing across my path, and felt a strange thrill of savage delight, and was strongly tempted to seize and devour him raw. Not that I was hungry then, except for that wildness which he represented. Is there a wildness in Thoreau that wants to seize the woodchuck?
Yeah, the wilderness that animal was represented.
This is why this
I
is
don't like the wilderness.
this is why this is not meant for children, because it's asked too many questions. It's not kosher. It's not kosher, and that's why I couldn't get a job in high school teaching English, because I would try to convert the children to vegetarians. Once or twice, however, while I lived at the pond, I found myself ranging the woods like a half-starved hound with a strange abandonment, seeking some kind of venison which I might devour. Sounds like he's a savage animal here, dear. He's trying to... Now, if venison is a deer... well, that's an easy way to get... I guess you could call it concentrated food, meat, which I might devour, and no morsel could have been too savage for me. The wildest scenes had become uncountably familiar. I found in myself, and still find, an instinct towards a higher, or as it is named, spiritual life, as do most men, and another towards a primitive, rank, and savage one. Do you think that I have primitive tendencies and savage ones as well as spiritual tendencies? Huh? You mean I'm just primitive only? Or am I spiritual?
Quite spiritual.
I'm spiritual when I meditate, and other times I'm savage. Okay, I'm never savage. And I reverence them both. Now he reveres the primitive thing and the spiritual. I love the wild. Isn't there a sense of the wild? Isn't it right to love the wild in a way?
It's good. Absolutely.
I like the wild. I like the woodchuck.
The more true sticks in wilderness are more correct.
I love the wild not less than the good. The wildness and adventure that are in fishing still recommended it to me. Actually, there's a question of fishing here. It'll maybe come up. I like sometimes to take rank hold on life and spend my day more as the animals do. How do you just spend the day like an animal?
Walk around the woods.
Well, let's think of like being an animal. There was interesting. I had just read about an interesting passage in my contemplation book on Richard St. Vicar about the birds. He's saying some birds, the birds like the flitter around. He's talking about he's comparing the birds to the mind or something. He says some birds, they fly up here, then they flutter around here, they fly over there, and some of them just sit. Then after they're done flying, they sit in a spot and they act like, oh, this is the place to be. So they settle down. The birds will stop, and he's comparing to this like the contemplation, like the way the birds first they're searching, then they stop searching, then they just sit.
Quieting the mind.
And then they'll sit for a while quiet on, let's say, a telephone wire or a tree. They just sit there. So what is going on that they say, this is a good spot now, we're just going to stop? And he's saying in this write-up in this Major Benjamin, that's like an analogy to the human mind. Why is that contemplation when you're sitting on the tree limb like a bird? But other times you fly around, of course. But now he's saying, "You spend my day more as the animals do. Perhaps I have owed to this employment and to hunting, when quite young, my closest acquaintance with nature. They early introduce us to and detain us in scenery, with which otherwise at that age we should have little acquaintance in English." But since we're pronouncing Thoreau, we're giving a French accent. Thoreau, reading of Thoreau. Fishermen, hunters, woodchuckers, and others spending their lives in the fields and woods, in a particular sense of a kind of nature themselves, are often in a more favorable mood for observing her and intervals of their pursuits than philosophers or poets even, who approach her with expectation. See the interesting aspect of being a hunter is you got to hike around in the woods. So there's the beautiful part of hunting, which is the roaming in the woods, but of course the killing is not good. She is not afraid to exhibit herself to them. The traveler on the plain is naturally a hunter, on the headwaters of the Missouri and Columbia a trapper, and at the falls of St. Mary a fisherman. He who is only a traveler learns things at second hand and by the halves, and is poor authority. We are most interested when science reports what those men already know practically or instinctively, for that alone is a true humanity, or account of human experience. They mistake who assert that the Yankee has few amusements because he has not so many public holidays, and men and boys do not play so many games as they do in England, for here the more primitive but solitary amusements of hunting, fishing, and the like have not yet been given place to the former. Almost every New England boy among my contemporaries shouldered a fowling piece between the ages of 10 and 14, and his hunting and fishing grounds were not limited like the preserves of an English nobleman, but were more boundless even than those of a savage. You see, as children on the farm in Ohio, we all had guns and BB guns. Even as a child, I got a BB gun, which I could then shoot at the birds. So, and it's surprising how infrequently I hit them. BB guns aren't very accurate. No wonder then that he did not oftener stay to play on the common, but
you kill them?
With a BB gun? Hardly kill them. I think it's rare that you actually kill them with a BB gun. But I think you could.
If you shoot them, what's happening?
Oh, with BB gun?
If you shoot one, it changes.
I don't know how often you actually killed one with a BB gun. But I think it's possible. But when you get older, you can get a 22. Remember the rat hunt in the barn with the automatic 22s. It's a wonder they didn't shoot each other. You know what automatic is? You shoot, bullets go flying at the rats.
Cool.
We had rats in the barn.
And who was shooting them?
and we went out with the automatic 22 and with the power flashlight and look for rats and shoot at them. These are wild savages I'm talking about. Farm boy savages out in Ohio with their. But you could argue that how are you gonna? You could just poison the rats probably. But no wonder then that he did not oftener stay to play on the common. He already a change is taking place, owing not to an increased humanity, but to an increased scarcity of game. Or perhaps the hunter is the greatest friend of the animals hunted, not accepting the humane society. That doesn't make sense. So. Moreover, when at the pond, I wished sometimes to add fish to my fare for variety. I have actually fished from the same kind of necessity that the first fishers did. Whatever humanity I might conjure up against it was all fatuous, and concerned my philosophy more than my feelings. I speak of fishing only now, for I had long felt differently about fowling, and sold my gun before I went to the woods. So he stopped shooting before the woods even, but now he's questioning his moral issues of fishing. Not that I am less humane than others, but I did not perceive that my feelings were much affected. I did not pity the fishes nor the worms. He didn't pity the fishes or worms, though, in theory. If you're a Jain monk, you wouldn't want to bother the worms. This was habit. As for fowling, during the last years that I carried a gun, my excuse was that I was studying ornithology, and sought only new or rare birds. But I confess that I am now inclined to think that there is a finer way of studying ornithology than this. It requires so much closer attention to the habits of the birds that, if for that reason only, I have been willing to omit the gun. Yeah, if you want to study the behavior of the birds, you don't want to just kill them. If you kill them, how do you study their behavior? Yet, notwithstanding the objection on the score of humanity, I am compelled to doubt if equally valuable sports are ever substituted for these, and when some of my friends have asked me anxiously about their boys, whether they should let them hunt, I have answered yes, remembering that it was one of the best parts of my education. Make them hunters, though sportsmen only at first, if possible, mighty hunters at last, so that they shall not find game large enough for them in this or any vegetable wilderness. Hunters as well as fishers of men. Thus far I am the opinion of Chaucer's nun, who, quote, gave not of the text a polled hen, that saith that hunters ben not holy men. Do you think hunters could have been holy men? They're not holy. My hunting career didn't last very long, because I converted to vegetarian at age 20. So I stopped shooting at the woodchuck. There is a period in the history of the individual as of the race when the hunters are the best men, as the Algonquins call them. So I could have been the best man. The period when I was shooting at the woodchuck. We cannot but pity the boy who has never fired a gun. He is no more humane, while his education has been sadly neglected. Do you think boys now should play Call of Duty and shoot in theory on video games and prepare themselves for war in Afghanistan by practicing on Call of Duty? They could be called up. You could actually just take down and track by invading the internet and track all the boys who are good at Call of Duty, and then you could what do you call it when you recruit them to war? And then you could do the draft them and make them fly drones. Forced into flying drones when the war comes. This was my answer with respect to those youths who were bent on this pursuit, trusting that they would soon outgrow it. No humane being past the thoughtless age of boyhood will wantonly murder any creature which holds its life by the same tenor that he does. The hare in its extremity cries like a child. I warn you, mothers, that my sympathies do not always make the usual philanthropic distinctions. Such is oftenest the young man's introduction to the forest, and the most original part of himself he goes thither. That's a nice word. Is it in the Bible? Thither. At first as a hunter and fisher, until at last, if he has the seeds of a better life in him, he distinguishes his proper objects as a poet or naturalist, it may be, and leaves the gun and fishing pole behind. Yeah, I had to stop fishing as well, so I only had a short fishing career as well, because I stopped eating fish, became a vegetarian with no pesco, no pecto. There was not an ovo either. I stopped eggs and fish, and so I was a lacto-vegetarian with no ovo and pecto. The mass of men are still and always young in this respect. In some countries a hunting parson is not uncommon sight. A hunting parson. Such a one might make a good shepherd's dog, but is far from being the good shepherd. Could you imagine your preacher going hunting? I have been surprised to consider that the only obvious employment, except wood chopping, ice cutting, and the like business, which ever, to my knowledge, detained at Walden Pond for a whole half a day any of my fellow citizens, whether fathers or children of the town, were just one exception, was fishing. Commonly they did not think that they were lucky or well paid for their time, unless they got a long string of fish, though they had the opportunity of seeing the pond all the while. They might go there 1,000 times before the sentiment of fishing would sink to the bottom and leave their purpose pure, but no doubt such a clarifying process would be going on all the while. The governor and his council faintly remember the pond, for they went a-fishing there when they were boys. But now they were too old and dignified to go a-fishing, so they know it no more forever. Yet even they expect to go to heaven at last. Should we just expect to go to heaven? Oh. So we can just mess around and expect to go to heaven at the end and just... If the legislature regards it, it is chiefly to regulate the number of hooks to be used there, but they know nothing about the hook of hooks with which to angle for the pond itself, employing the legislature for a bait. Thus, even in civilized communities, the embryo man passes through the 100th stage of development. I have found repeatedly of late years that I cannot fish without falling a little in self-respect. I have tried it again and again. I have skill at it, and I, like many of my fellows, a certain instinct for it, which revives from time to time. But always, when I have done, I feel that it would have been better if I had not fished. He has regret like one of his eyes, and Gurdjieff wishes that he hadn't fished. And one would have fished and one would not have fished. In this quantum universe of existence and different lives, in the multiverse, one fished and one did not. I think that I do not mistake. It is a faint intimation, yet so are the first streaks of morning. There is unquestionably this instinct in me which belongs to the lower orders of creation. Yet with every year I am less a fisherman, though without more humanity or even wisdom. At present I am no fisherman at all. He quit fishing. But I see that if I were to live in a wilderness, I should again be tempted to become a fisher and hunter in earnest. It might be hard to live in the wild without killing something, I suppose. Don't know how the Eskimos can make it. Maybe they should just not live there. I don't know. I prefer to live for year-round, vegetable-friendly environment. That's why we go back to the issue of Turkey. I like southern Turkey because you could grow vegetables year-round. I could have been Turkish. I would be in Turkey right now, and then I'd be stuck with them, in trouble with the Turkish authorities as a spy for the Kurds. I'd be accused of helping the Kurds. Oh goodness! But I see that if I were to live, that's why I'm not in Turkey. But I see that if I were to live in a wilderness, I should again be tempted to become a fisher and hunter in earnest. Besides, there is something essentially unclean about this diet and all flesh, and I began to see where housework commences and whence the endeavor, which costs so much to wear a tidy, respectable appearance each day, to keep the house sweet and free from all ill odors and sights, having been my own butcher and scullion and cook, as well as the gentleman for whom the dishes were served up. I can speak from an unusually complete experience. The practical objection to animal food in my case was its uncleanness. And besides, when I had caught and cleaned and cooked and eaten my fish, they seemed not to have fed me essentially. It was insignificant and unnecessary and cost more than it came to. Plus the fish stink and stuff, right? And those scales, my God. I don't like to clean a fish. Don't like eating fish. Don't like the smell, and I don't like cleaning them. I don't like catching them. I feel guilty. The one good side about getting your own, like killing your own fish, is you don't see it as like a product in a store. If you have to go and kill your own pig or cow or fish, you might at least be aware that you're killing. So it's only morally correct to eat meat if you killed it yourself with your own bare hands. So you can realize what you're doing. That's morally correct. But buying it at the supermarket is incorrect. It was insignificant and unnecessary, cost more than it came to. It's also expensive. A little bread or a few potatoes would have done as well, with less trouble and filth. Like many of my contemporaries, I had rarely for many years used animal food or tea or coffee, not so much because of any ill effects which I have traced to them as because they were not agreeable to my imagination. The repugnance to animal food is not the effect of experience, but is an instinct. You know how these little kids sometimes refuse to eat meat, just instinctively. It appeared more beautiful to live low and fare hard in many respects. Though I never did so, I went far enough to please my imagination. There's his imagination again. I believe that every man who has ever been earnest to preserve his higher and poetic faculties in the best condition has been particularly inclined to abstain from animal food and from much food of any kind. Didn't that woman, Susan Cheever, say that Thoreau only ate a little bit? Like he had a little bit of, what was it, honey with bread and he was done? He was a small portion eater, she said. It is a significant fact stated by entomologists, I find it in Kirby and Spence, that some insects in their perfect state, though furnished with organs of feeding, make no use of them. And they lay it down, quote, as a general rule that almost all the insects in this state eat much less than that of a larvae. The voracious caterpillar, when transformed into a butterfly, and the gluttonous maggot, when become a fly, content themselves with a drop or two of honey or some other sweet liquid. The abdomen under the wings of the butterfly still represents the larva. This is the tidbit which tempts his insectivorous fate. The gross feeder is a man in the larva state, and there are whole nations in that condition. Nations without fancy or imagination, whose vast abdomens betray them. It's talking about eating less, I guess. That when you're a larva, you eat a lot, and then when you grow up, you'll eat less. Are you more grown up than me because you eat less than me? It is hard to provide and cook so simple and clean a diet as it will not offend the imagination, but this, I think, is to be fed when we feed the body. They should both sit down at the same table, yet perhaps this may be done. The fruits eaten temperately need not make us ashamed of our appetites, nor interrupt the worthiest pursuits. Is he saying we should just eat half an apple or one slice of apple and then not interrupt our long time period meditation? The fruits eaten temporarily need not make us ashamed of our appetites nor interrupt the worthiest pursuits, but put an extra condiment into your dish and it will poison you. God. He says we eat too many dishes at our meals and we should have simplified food even. Goodness.
I agree.
When we eat like more than like 2 or 3 things in a meal, it's like overcomplicated.
Imagine those Asiatic meals in Indonesia.
Should we have
They
a
put so many things in a soup.
12-course meal?
You see,
Uh-huh.
even in a simple soup in Asia,
Uh-huh.
they put too many things.
All those Mongolian grills are like crazy. Like people think it's good. You can go.
Like those Thai soups.
You say I can go. I can put up to 40 things in
You
my
see, in Greek, this is
in
simple
my
in a
bowl.
way. Mediterranean cuisine is simple. We don't have too many
I could put 40 things in my salad. That must be good.
No.
It's not good.
No, they don't, because usually they don't even go together. The taste should be complementary, the nutrition value should be complementary. So if you know, it's better.
I used to like the
and
complex.
the stomach also digest one thing at a time. It is, you get it crazy if you start mixing up things.
But what if you eat for pleasure? What if you don't eat for pleasure?
Then you suffer.
You put an extra condiment in your dish and it will poison you. It is not worth the while to live by rich crookery. I notice a lot of people, they like, when they're not happy, they have to have rich food. And that's why they say when you're unhappy, you gain weight.
And that's how you put weight.
When I was unhappy, I gained weight. I guess so. Rich crookery, cookery.
The opposite. Me, when I'm worrying, I'm not feeling well, I can't eat anything at all.
Oh, you can't eat when you're worried.
No, I can't solve anything.
Well, if you don't have the experience of extreme bliss and meditation after a very long and regular periods of meditation with an outrageous amount of bliss, then you might have a desire for rich food. You could replace lack of meditation with rich food and eat a lot and get fat. So what if I stop meditating and just eat a lot of rich food?
Get out of here.
I'd be out of here. God. I could eat rich food and get like a gigantic piece of mozzarella cheese, maybe. I'm reading this because I'm afraid I'll get kicked out if I eat too much. It is not worth the while to live by rich cookery. Most men will feel shame if I could be thrown out if I don't read thoroughly, if I don't thoroughly absorb and learn from Thoreau, if I don't become thoroughly thrown, I could be thrown out by not eating properly. Most men will feel shame if caught preparing with their own hands precisely such a dinner, whether of animal or vegetable food, as is every day prepared for them by others. Yet till this is otherwise, we are not civilized, and if gentlemen and ladies are not true men and women.
Interesting what he says. Yeah, because many people are waiting for. They should at least contribute a little bit,
Well, this certainly suggests what change is to be made. It may be vain to ask why the imagination will not be reconciled to flesh and fat. I am satisfied that it is not. It is not a reproach that man is a carnivorous animal. True, he can and does live in a great measure by preying on the other animals, but this is a miserable way, as anyone who will go to snaring rabbits or slaughtering lambs may learn, and he will be regarded as a benefactor of his race, who shall teach man to confine himself to a more innocent and wholesome diet. I can't believe in this modern time of like 21st century that people still eat meat and kill fish. I just can't believe it. Mm.
I don't know, maybe it's not so bad.
Why is it not so bad? Whatever my own practice may be, I have no doubt that it is a part of the destiny of the human race in its gradual improvement to leave off eating animals as surely as the savage tribes have left off eating each other when they come in contact with the more civilized. Whatever my own practice may be, I have no doubt that it is a part of the destiny of the human race in its gradual improvement to leave off eating animals as surely as the savage tribes have left off eating each other when they came in contact with the more civilized. I think in one of the Gnostic books, Jesus says that eventually mankind will not have to cleave off multiplying so much, being fruitful and multiplying. If one listens to the faintest but constant suggestions of his genius, which are certainly true, he sees not to what extremes or even insanity it may lead him, and yet that way, as he grows more resolute and faithful, his road lies. The faintest assured objection which one healthy man feels will at length prevail over the arguments and customs of mankind. No man ever followed his genius till it misled him, though not thorough, just though the result were bodily weakness. Yet perhaps no one can say that the consequences were to be regretted, for these were a life of conformity to higher principles. If the day and night are such that you greet them with joy, and life emits a fragrance like flowers and sweet-scented herbs, is more elastic, more starry, more immortal, that is your success. All nature is your congratulation, and you have cause momentarily to bless yourself. The greatest gains and values are farthest from being appreciated. We easily come to doubt if they exist. We soon forget them. They are the highest reality. Perhaps the facts most astonishing and most real are never communicated by man to man. The true harvest of my daily life is somewhat as intangible and indescribable as the tints of morning or evening. It is a little star-dust caught, a segment of the rainbow which I have clutched. Yet for my part I was never unusually squirmish. I could sometimes eat a fried rat with a good relish if it were necessary. I am glad to have drunk water so long for the same reason I prefer the natural sky to an opium eater's heaven. Opium. Here we get into the opium crisis. Opiates. I would fain keep sober always, and there are infinite degrees of drunkenness. I believe that water is the only drink for a wise man. He's into water and not booze. So he's against alcohol, against eating fish, and against meat. I believe that water is the only drink for a wise man. Wine is not so noble a liquor, and think of dashing the hopes of a morning with a cup of warm coffee, or of an evening with a dish of tea. Ah, how low I fall when I am tempted by them. Even music may be intoxicating. Such apparently slight causes destroyed Rome, Greece, and Rome, and will destroy England and America. Music and tea. Those are the two things I do have. Tea. I drink tea, coffee, and listen to music. So I could be thrown out for the crime of indulging in coffee, tea, and music. So I better take a more thorough look at Thoreau. Hmm. Hmm. Though tea and coffee destroyed Greece and Rome and will destroy England and America. The global trade in tea and coffee, and all the Starbucks destroyed America. Of all ebrieties is ebriosity. Who does not prefer to be intoxicated by the air he breathes? I have found it to be the most serious objection to coarse labors long continue that they compelled me to eat and drink coarsely also, but to tell the truth, I find myself at present somewhat less particular in these respects. I carry less religion to the table, ask no blessing, not because I am wiser than I was, but I am obliged to confess, because however much it is to be regretted with years, I have grown more coarse and indifferent. Perhaps these questions are entertained only in youth, as most believe of poetry. My practice is nowhere. Quote, nowhere. My opinion is here. Nevertheless, I am far from regarding myself as one of those privileged ones to whom the Vede refers when it says that, quote, who has true faith in the omnipresent Supreme Being may eat all that exists, unquote. Is not bound to inquire what is his food and who prepares it. Even in their case, it is to be observed, as a Hindu commentator has remarked, that the Vedant limits this privilege, quote, to, quote, the time of distress. According to Hinduism, only during the time of distress. So if that means you're starving to death, you can eat meat. So if I was the mountain man, if I was okay, who has not sometimes derived an inexpressible satisfaction from his food in which appetite had no share? I have been thrilled to think that I owed a mental perception to the commonly gross sense of taste that I have been inspired through the palate that some berries which I had eaten on a hillside had fed my genius. Seems that his genius comes from berries. Thoreau's genius came from berries. Quote, the soul not being mistress of herself, unquote, says Swan Tzu, quote, one looks and one does not see, one listens and one does not hear, one eats and one does not know the savor of food. He who distinguishes the true savor of his food can never be a glutton. He who does not cannot be otherwise. A Puritan may go to his brown bread crust with as gross an appetite as ever an alderman to his turtle. I'll have to finish up. Not that food which entereth into the mouth defileth the man, but the appetite with which it is eaten. It is neither the quality nor the quantity, but the devotion and essential savors When that which is eaten is not a viand to sustain our animal or inspire our spiritual life, but food for the worms that possess us. If the hunter has a taste for mud turtles, muskrats, and other such savage tidbits, the fine lady indulges a taste for jelly made of calf's foot and for sardines from over the sea, and they are even. He goes to the mill pond, she to her preserve pot. The wonder is how you and I can live this slimy, beastly life, eating and drinking. I guess we talked about food. We talked about killing and food. Whether you should kill to eat, and how much you should eat, and whether you should have tea and coffee, and if will coffee destroy America, and if you should just have water and no booze. He's against drinking booze. And reading rich food with all those ingredients, expensive food with all those spices and a whole bunch of things. I think it overcomplicates the digestive process. So you don't eat fish and you don't eat meat and you don't drink alcohol and you don't kill fish. We read from Higher Laws and Henry David Thoreau. We read Henry David Thoreau, not and if I don't eat meat or rich food or too much food, or if I continue to meditate, then I won't get thrown out. I could get thrown out if I ate rich food and got fat.